The quantum distortion field dissipated around Zerath's crystalline form as she materialized in what was decidedly not the designated arrival chamber of Earth's Interspecies Research Division. Instead of the sterile white walls and monitoring equipment she'd expected, she found herself in a dimly lit corridor that reeked of artificial sanitizers and biological decay. A quick scan of her surroundings confirmed her worst fears. She'd materialized in a human medical facility. Her crystalline body refracted the harsh fluorescent lighting, casting prismatic patterns on the worn linoleum floor. According to her research, humans called these places hospitals, inefficient centers of emotional contamination where their species insisted on gathering to experience their strongest feelings: pain, grief, joy, and relief. A series of rapid footsteps approached. Zerath quickly adjusted her optical refraction index, becoming nearly invisible against the pale blue walls. A group of humans in white coats rushed past, their faces displaying what her species had classified as urgency. She allowed herself a moment of scientific satisfaction. At least she'd get to observe human emotional responses firsthand, even if this wasn't her assigned location. Time of death, 1547. A deep voice announced from a nearby room. Zerath's curiosity overcame her initial caution. She moved closer, her crystalline feet making no sound on the hospital floor. Through the doorway, she observed a scene that her preliminary research hadn't prepared her for. A human male stood beside a bed, his hand resting on the shoulder of a weeping woman. The deceased, an elderly human male, lay still under white sheets. What caught Zerath's attention wasn't the dead human, but the living ones around him. The doctor's face held an expression she couldn't quite categorize within her existing emotional taxonomy. "Mrs. Rodriguez," the doctor spoke softly, his voice carrying a resonance that caused unexpected vibrations in Zerath's crystal matrix. "Your husband didn't suffer. He was comfortable, and he knew you were here with him until the end." Zerath's sensors detected elevated levels of cortisol and oxytocin in both humans. The combination shouldn't work. Stress hormones and bonding hormones operating simultaneously. Yet somehow, the interaction appeared to be serving a purpose. The woman's respiratory rate was gradually stabilizing. "Thank you, Dr. Chen," the woman managed between sobs. "Marcus, he always said you were more than just his doctor. You were his friend." The doctor, Marcus Chen, Zerath noted for her records, displayed his own physiological response. His eyes grew moist, a phenomenon Zerath had studied but never witnessed in person. Human tears, a wasteful expenditure of minerals and proteins that her species had evolved beyond eons ago. Yet as she watched, something unprecedented occurred. The moment those tears appeared in Marcus Chen's eyes, Zerath's crystalline structure experienced a microscopic shift. Thousands of molecular bonds vibrated at frequencies that had no place in her supposedly perfect lattice structure. "It was my honor to be both," Marcus replied, and the resonance of his voice sent another wave of unwanted vibrations through Zerath's form. She ran a quick diagnostic, but her systems reported no damage, only change. For the next hour, Zerath observed as Marcus Chen guided the grieving family through what humans called the aftermath. He arranged for grief counseling, handled documentation, and most peculiarly, shared stories about the deceased that prompted both tears and laughter from the family. The Lumini had classified human emotional displays as evolutionary holdovers, proof that their species still clung to primitive responses instead of embracing pure logic. Yet as Zerath watched Marcus Chen navigate the complexity of death with equal parts scientific precision and emotional intelligence, she began to suspect a flaw in her species analysis. When the family finally left, Marcus Chen remained in the room alone. He stood by the window, his reflected image showing what Zerath's databases labeled as exhaustion. But there was something else, something her extensive research hadn't covered. A quiet strength that seemed to emanate not from his physical form, but from somewhere deeper. The vibrations in her crystal matrix intensified, and for the first time in her existence, Xyrath wondered if perhaps her people had missed something fundamental about emotions, something important enough to justify documenting, even if it meant deviating from her original mission parameters. 3 days into her unplanned observation at Hope Memorial Hospital, Xyrath had filled multiple quantum storage banks with data on human emotional responses. She cataloged 73 distinct variations of human crying, 49 different laughs, and countless facial expressions that defied her classification systems. But nothing had prepared her for the burn ward. The child couldn't have been more than 6 Earth years old. Her small form lay covered in regenerative bandages, yet she smiled whenever Marcus Chen entered the room. Xyrath watched from her usual corner, her crystalline form bent to refract light around her, as the doctor approached the child's bed. "Ready to check those bandages, Sarah?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying that peculiar warmth that still caused unauthorized resonances in Xyrath's matrix. "Will it hurt again?" Sarah's voice quavered, but she maintained her smile. "Remember what we talked about. You're the bravest space explorer in the galaxy, and this is just another mission." Marcus produced a small, glittering sticker from his pocket. "Look what Mission Control sent for you." The child's laugh that followed was unlike any Xyrath had recorded. It contained pain, yes, but also something else. Trust, perhaps. The sound created new harmonic patterns in her crystal structure, patterns that spread like cracks through ice. As Marcus carefully removed the bandages, he kept Sarah distracted with stories about stellar phenomena. Xyrath found herself leaning closer, her scientific detachment wavering as she recognized several inaccuracies in his astronomical descriptions. "Actually," she said before she could stop herself, "the Horsehead Nebula's primary composition." The words died as both Marcus and Sarah turned toward her corner. Her refraction camouflage had slipped, revealing prismatic glimpses of her true form. "Oh," Sarah breathed, wonder replacing fear in her eyes. "Are you a space angel?" Marcus's hand had moved protectively toward his patient, but his expression showed curiosity rather than alarm. "I was wondering when you'd finally speak up. You've been watching for days." Xyrath's diplomatic protocols failed her entirely. This wasn't how first contact scenarios were supposed to proceed. "I am not an angel. I am a Lumini researcher studying human emotional responses. Your nebula description was inefficient and incorrect." To her surprise, Marcus laughed. "Well, my astronomical accuracy might be questionable, but it got Sarah through her bandage change without tears. Would you like to help me explain the real composition of the Horsehead Nebula to her?" Before Xyrath could cite regulations about non-interference, Sarah spoke again. "You're made of crystals, like my mom's necklace that sparkles in the sun. The comparison is imprecise. My crystalline matrix is a complex lattice off." Xyrath stopped as Marcus pulled something from his lab coat pocket. "Cookie," he offered, holding out a round brown disc. "Sarah's mom brings them for the staff. They're chocolate chip, a vital part of human medical research." The gesture violated at least 7 different protocols. Yet Xyrath found herself moving closer, her form fully visible now in the afternoon sunlight. She had no need for human sustenance, but her sensors detected complex organic compounds in the offered food that warranted investigation. "That's it," Marcus encouraged as she reached for the cookie. "Though I should warn you, chocolate chip cookies have been known to cause unexpected emotional responses in first-time consumers." Sarah giggled at this, and the sound created new resonances in Xyrath's matrix. The vibrations felt pleasant, a completely unscientific observation that she immediately filed away for further study. As Xyrath analyzed the cookie's molecular structure, she became aware that something fundamental had shifted. She had compromised her observer status, violated multiple directives, and worst of all, she found herself unable to regret these transgressions. "The nebula," Sarah prompted, eyes wide with wonder. "Tell me about the real one." Marcus looked at Xyrath, his eyes crinkling with what her databases labeled as gentle amusement. "Yes, please do tell us. I'm sure my version could use some scientific correction." And for the first time in her existence, Xyrath felt something that might have been pleasure as she began to explain, her crystalline form casting rainbows across Sarah's delighted face. The explosion rocked Hope Memorial Hospital at exactly 14:23 Earth hours. Xyrath's crystalline sensors detected the pressure wave milliseconds before the sound reached her, followed by the acrid scent of burning electronics and plastic. She stood in Sarah's room, midway through explaining the crystallization process of mineral formations, when the lights flickered and died. East Wing, oxygen line rupture. A nurse's voice carried down the corridor. Fire in the ore. Marcus burst through the door, his usual calm demeanor overlaid with what Xyrath now recognized as controlled urgency. Sarah, stay with Nurse Chen. Xyrath. He paused, seemingly weighing options. I could use your help. The request violated every protocol of non-interference she'd been programmed with. Yet her crystalline feet were moving before her logic centers could process the implications. She followed Marcus through smoke-filled corridors, her matrix automatically adjusting to filter the toxic air. 3 patients trapped in Ore 2, Marcus explained as they ran. The fire suppression system failed, and the temperatures too high for our teams to reach them. Xyrath's crystal structure could withstand temperatures far beyond human tolerance. She understood now why Marcus had asked for her help, and why she couldn't refuse. My presence will be recorded. The Council. We'll have to deal with it later, Marcus finished, his voice carrying that peculiar strength she'd first noticed days ago. Right now, there are lives at stake. They reached the burning operating room. Through the viewing window, Xyrath could see 3 unconscious forms on tables, monitoring equipment still beeping frantically. The room's temperature exceeded 200 degrees Celsius. Without further hesitation, Xyrath pressed her crystalline hands against the door. Her matrix began absorbing thermal energy, causing her structure to glow from within. The door's metal handle cooled enough for her to grip it. Stay back, she ordered Marcus, using authority she didn't technically possess. To her surprise, he complied. Inside the operating room, flames licked at her crystalline form. She felt her matrix strain as it absorbed more and more heat, creating patterns of stress she'd never experienced. One by one, she disconnected the patients from their equipment and carried them to safety, her normally transparent body now glowing like a small sun. The last patient was heavier than the others. As Xyrath lifted him, she felt something give way in her crystal structure. A crack formed, running from her shoulder to her core matrix. She stumbled, but managed to clear the doorway before her legs gave out. Marcus caught both her and the patient, somehow managing to lower them safely to the floor. Through her compromised sensors, Xyrath watched him check the patient's vitals before turning to her. You're damaged, he said, fingers hovering over the crack in her crystalline form. The concern in his voice created new resonances along the fracture line. Matrix integrity at 67%, she reported, trying to maintain scientific detachment. The crack is problematic. But it wasn't just a crack. Where her perfect crystal structure had split, something new was forming. Tiny droplets of luminescent liquid seeped from the fracture, each one catching light like a miniature star. You're crying, Marcus whispered, wonder replacing concern in his voice. He reached out, catching one of the droplets on his finger. How is this possible? Xyrath watched in equal fascination as more droplets formed. This is unprecedented. My species, we haven't produced liquid emissions since our crystal evolution 12,000 years ago. Around them, emergency response teams worked to contain the fire. The 3 patients were being tended to, their vital signs stable. But Marcus remained focused on the luminescent tears tracking down Xyrath's crystalline face. Maybe, he said softly, some evolutionary changes aren't about becoming harder or more perfect. Maybe sometimes they're about becoming more open to feeling. The resonance of his words traveled through Xyrath's damaged matrix, creating new patterns in the crystalline structure around the crack. She should have been alarmed by these changes, should have initiated emergency protocols. Instead, she found herself reaching up to touch one of her own tears, wondering if perhaps the greatest scientific discovery of her career would have nothing to do with human emotions, and everything to do with rediscovering her own. Valter materialized in the hospital's music therapy room without warning, his perfect crystalline form casting harsh shadows across the children's colorful instruments. The sight that greeted him defied all Lumini protocols. Zerath, her once flawless crystal structure now laced with luminescent cracks, sat among human children as they sang. Researcher Zerath, his voice cut through the melody like Arctic wind. The council requires your immediate presence. The children fell silent. Marcus, who had been teaching them a simple lullaby, stepped forward instinctively. Zerath noticed how he positioned himself between Valter and the young patients, just as he'd done during the fire. "We're in the middle of a therapy session," Marcus stated, his tone carrying that peculiar mix of authority and compassion that still created unauthorized resonances in Zerath's matrix. Valter's crystalline form shifted, refracting light in patterns that signaled deep disapproval. "This is a Lumini matter. Your presence is irrelevant, human." But Zerath had spent enough time observing humans, observing Marcus, to recognize the flaw in Valter's logic. "These children's emotional stability is relevant to everything we study," she said, rising to her full height. "Or have you forgotten our mission to understand human resilience?" "Your mission." Valter's voice carried harmonics of authority that would have once compelled her immediate obedience, was to observe, not participate, not compromise your perfect form with. He gestured to her luminescent cracks, these impurities. One of the children, a young girl recovering from neural surgery, reached for Zerath's crystalline hand. "Your light is pretty," she whispered, "like starshine." The touch sent cascading resonances through Zerath's transformed matrix. More luminescent droplets formed along her cracks, each one catching and transforming the room's harsh fluorescent light into something softer, more alive. "This is precisely what concerns the council." Valter moved closer, his perfect form now looming over them. "You're experiencing unauthorized physical responses to emotional stimuli. It's degrading your basic structure." Or perhaps, Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying that strength Zerath had come to rely on. "She's evolving. When was the last time your species actually studied their own emotional capacity, instead of just dismissing it as primitive?" Valter turned to Marcus with a crystalline chime that Zerath recognized as dangerous. "You overstep, human. Our species achieved perfection through the elimination of such weaknesses." "Perfection?" Zerath found herself speaking, her voice carrying new harmonics that resonated with the children's instruments around them. Was it perfect to watch 3 humans nearly die in a fire because protocol demanded non-interference? Is it perfect to classify the joy of these children learning to sing again as mere primitive response? Her words caused more cracks to form, spreading like silver lightning across her crystal surface. But for the first time, she didn't try to stop them. Each fracture leaked light, transforming her rigid form into something that seemed to pulse with its own inner music. "Listen," she said, softer now. "Really listen, Valter. Not just to their voices, but to what they awaken in us." The children, sensing something important happening, began to hum their lullaby again. The sound filled the room, bouncing off crystal surfaces and creating complex harmonics that Zerath's sensors registered as both mathematically perfect and emotionally resonant. To everyone's surprise, Valter's perfect form shuddered. A single hairline crack appeared along his arm, leaking the faintest trace of light. "This is impossible," he whispered, but Zerath heard the change in his harmonic pattern. "We evolved beyond this." Marcus stepped forward, his presence somehow bridging the space between the two crystalline beings. "Or maybe you just forgot how to listen to your own music." Valter touched his crack, watching as a single luminescent drop formed. His voice, when he spoke again, carried new frequencies. "The council must be informed. This changes everything." "No," Zerath replied, standing straighter as more light spilled from her transformed form. This remembers everything. Everything we were before we chose perfect emptiness over imperfect feeling. The children's lullaby continued, filling the room with harmonies that seemed to dance in the light of Zirath's tears, while Valter stood frozen, watching his own first drop of emotion fall. The hospital garden bathed in sunset light as Valtor attempted to activate the emergency quantum transport. His crystalline form pulsed with enforcement protocols, each harmonic designed to compel Zirath's compliance. But something had changed in her matrix, something that went deeper than the visible cracks and luminescent tears. "You will return for purification." Valter's voice carried frequencies that should have paralyzed her crystal structure. "The Council's decision is final." Marcus stood beside her, close enough that she could detect his elevated heart rate. His presence created new resonances in her transformed matrix, strengthening rather than weakening her resistance. "Your authority is based on an incomplete understanding of our own history," Zirath responded, her voice carrying harmonics that made the garden's flowers tremble. "These changes aren't corruption. They're awakening." Valtor raised his hand, crystal energy gathering around his form. "Then you leave me no choice. Protocol demands." "Protocol," Marcus interrupted, stepping forward. His voice carried that peculiar intensity that had first triggered changes in Zirath's matrix. "Is that all you can offer? Rules and regulations while one of your own discovers something revolutionary about your species?" The garden fell silent. Even the evening birds seemed to pause, watching the confrontation between flesh and crystal. Valter's perfect form vibrated with barely contained energy. "You know nothing of our species, human. We achieved perfection through the elimination of chaotic emotional responses. These tears are a regression." The word tears triggered something in Zirath's transformed matrix. Luminescent droplets began falling faster, each one carrying fragments of memory, not just her own, but older, deeper remembrances encoded in her crystal structure. "You're wrong," she whispered, her voice gaining strength as more memories surfaced. "I see it now. Our ancestors didn't eliminate emotions. They buried them, encoded them into our very matrix." As if in response to her words, her tears began to change. Each droplet caught the setting sun's light and transformed it, projecting holographic images of ancient Lumini history. The garden filled with scenes of their ancestors, crystal beings who laughed, cried, and loved before the age of perfection. Marcus watched in wonder as the history of an entire civilization played out in tears of light. "Your tears aren't just emotional responses," he said softly. "They're your species' buried memories." Valter took an involuntary step forward, his own matrix beginning to resonate with the projected images. "This is impossible. These records were purged millennia ago." "You can't purge what's written into the very structure of our being." Zirath reached out, letting her tears fall onto a nearby rose. The flower's petals crystallized, becoming transparent while retaining their organic beauty. "We didn't evolve past emotions. We imprisoned them. And now they're breaking free." More cracks appeared across her form, but they no longer brought pain. Each one leaked light and memory, transforming her from a rigid crystal structure into something new, something that merged the mathematical perfection of her species with the organic fluidity of feeling. "Stop this," Valtor commanded, but his voice wavered as another crack appeared in his own form. "The Council. The Council needs to see this," Marcus interjected, his hand hovering near Zirath's crystalline shoulder. "They need to understand that suppressing emotions didn't perfect your species. It froze you in time." Zirath's tears fell faster now, each one carrying centuries of hidden memories. The garden had become a cathedral of light and crystal, organic, and geometric patterns merging in impossible ways. She turned to Valtor, her form now more light than crystal. "I choose this," she declared, her voice carrying harmonics that made every crystal structure in range resonate. "I choose to feel, to change, to grow." As the last light of sunset painted the sky, Zirath felt Marcus's hand finally make contact with her shoulder. The touch sent cascading reactions through her entire being, causing tears of joy to fall like stars. Each droplet carried not just ancient memories now, but new ones that spoke of possible futures where perfection wasn't the absence of feeling, but its fullest expression. News of Zareth's transformation spread through the crystalline networks of her homeworld like fractures through ice. In the hospital's research lab, she and Marcus worked to document the changes while reports flooded in from across Lumini space, thousands of their kind experiencing the first tremors of emotional awakening. Another 100 cases reported, Marcus said, reviewing the quantum transmissions on his tablet. The screen reflected off Zareth's now iridescent form, creating patterns that danced across the lab walls. They're calling it the resonance cascade. Zareth touched one of her luminescent cracks, watching as a tear formed and fell onto the sampling slide below. Through the microscope, its structure revealed complexities that challenged everything her people had believed about their evolution. The emotional capacity was never eliminated, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics of wonder. It was transformed, crystallized within our matrix. My tears aren't just carrying memories. They're keys, unlocking what we buried inside ourselves. Marcus moved closer, his proximity sending ripples through her transformed crystal structure. She'd stopped trying to suppress these reactions, instead focusing on understanding them. Each new feeling created its own unique resonance, its own pattern of light and memory. Look at this, he said, adjusting the microscope's settings. The molecular structure of your tears changes based on the emotion you're experiencing. Joy creates one pattern, empathy another. Before she could respond, the lab's quantum communicator chimed. A group of Lumini scientists appeared in holographic form, their once perfect crystal structures now showing the first signs of change. Researcher Zareth, the lead scientist, spoke, her voice carrying unauthorized harmonics of excitement. We've analyzed the samples you sent. The implications, they're revolutionary. Tell me, Zareth replied, noting how Marcus stepped closer, his hand near enough to her crystal form that she could feel the warmth of his presence. Your tears contain trace elements we've never seen before, or rather, elements we haven't seen in 12,000 years. They match exactly with samples preserved from before the Great Crystallization, when our species first chose to suppress emotion in favor of pure logic. The revelation sent new cracks spiraling across Zareth's form, each one leaking light and memory. We didn't evolve beyond emotions, she whispered. We evolved to contain them. Yes, the scientist's hologram flickered with excitement. And now, through your transformation, we're remembering how to release them safely. The resonance patterns you've documented, they're not just affecting individuals. They're awakening ancient systems within our crystalline cities, our art galleries, our musical archives. Marcus leaned forward, his scientific curiosity evident in his quickened pulse. Your entire civilization is remembering itself. The lead scientist's crystal form chimed in agreement. We've discovered chambers deep beneath our central archives, sealed for millennia. They're responding to the resonance frequencies in Zareth's tears, revealing art and music we thought lost forever. As if in response to these words, Zareth felt a new type of tear form, one carrying not memory but possibility. It fell onto the lab table, crystallizing into a complex structure that began emitting a haunting melody. That's impossible, one of the other scientists whispered. That's the song of first light. It was supposed to be lost during the Great Crystallization. Marcus watched in wonder as the crystallized tear continued its song. Not lost, he said softly, just waiting to be remembered. Zareth felt something new then, a resonance that went deeper than memory or emotion. Each note of the ancient song created new patterns in her matrix, weaving together the mathematical precision of her crystalline nature with the fluid grace of feeling. We need to document everything, she said, her voice harmonizing with the melody. Every change, every awakening, every new pattern of light. The scientists nodded eagerly, their own forms beginning to show signs of transformation. But as they discussed protocols and procedures, Zareth felt Marcus's hand finally bridge the gap between them, resting gently on her crystalline shoulder. The touch sent cascades of light through her entire being, and the tears that fell now carried something entirely new, not just ancient memories or awakening emotions, but the first notes of a future where logic and feeling danced together in crystalline harmony. The hospital's annual fundraising gala transformed the normally sterile atrium into a shimmering wonderland. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across the walls, inadvertently mimicking the way Zarath's transformed form now caught and refracted light. She stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching humans move to music that sent pleasant vibrations through her matrix. "May I have this dance?" Marcus appeared beside her, dressed in what humans called a tuxedo. His offered hand created anticipatory resonances in her crystal structure. "I haven't analyzed human dance patterns sufficiently to." "Sometimes," he interrupted gently, "analysis isn't required, just feeling." Before she could formulate a logical response, he guided her onto the dance floor. The moment their bodies connected, new harmonics rippled through her form, creating patterns of light that mesmerized nearby dancers. "Your tears," Marcus whispered. "They're making music." He was right. Each luminescent droplet that fell from her crystal form struck the floor with a different note, adding an otherworldly harmony to the orchestra's melody. Humans stopped to watch as she and Marcus moved together, crystal and flesh in an impossible duet. That's when she felt it, discordant frequencies cutting through the harmony. Her sensors registered multiple quantum distortions moments before they materialized. 6 Lumini purifiers, their perfect crystal forms harsh and unyielding in the soft light. "The aberration must be contained," their leader announced, voice-carrying harmonics designed to paralyze lesser crystalline beings. "The corruption cannot be allowed to spread." Marcus pulled Zerath closer, his heartbeat steady against her crystal form. "She's not corrupted," he said, voice carrying that strength she'd come to rely on. "She's evolved." The purifiers moved forward in perfect geometric formation. "Your human sentiment is irrelevant. The Council has deemed this emotional awakening a threat to our perfect society." But they hadn't counted on what happened next. Valter materialized between them and their target, his once perfect form now laced with his own network of luminescent cracks. "Your information is outdated," he announced, his voice carrying new harmonics of authority. "The Council is divided. Many of us have begun to remember." More quantum signatures registered as dozens of transformed lumini appeared throughout the atrium. Each bore the marks of emotional awakening. Crystalline forms, softened by light-leaking cracks, matrices humming with recovered memories. The lead purifier raised his hand, crystal energy gathering. "Then you will all be purified." "No," Zerath stepped forward, still holding Marcus's hand. "You will listen." She began to sing, her voice carrying harmonics not heard in 12,000 years. Each note caused her tears to fall in precise patterns, creating a crystalline symphony that resonated with the very structure of reality. The ancient song of first light, recovered from her tears days ago, filled the atrium with living memory. The purifier's perfect forms began to vibrate in response. One by one, hairline cracks appeared in their flawless surfaces. What is this?" their leader demanded, but his voice wavered with unauthorized emotion. "The truth," Marcus answered, his human voice somehow harmonizing perfectly with the crystalline song. "You can't purify what's meant to be felt." The first purifier's tear fell like a star, carrying 12,000 years of suppressed feeling. Others followed, their perfect geometric patterns dissolving into organic flows of light and emotion. Sarah, watching from her wheelchair near the punch bowl, began to sing along with Zerath's alien melody. Other humans joined in, their imperfect voices creating a counterpoint to the crystalline harmony that filled the space between worlds. The lead purifier made one last attempt to raise his weapon, but the music had already cracked his matrix too deeply. Light spilled from his form as millennia of buried memories awakened. "How do you stop it?" he whispered, watching his own tears fall. Zerath turned to Marcus, her crystalline form now pulsing with both ancient song and new emotion. "You don't," she said softly. "You learned to dance with it." As if to demonstrate, she pulled Marcus back into their interrupted dance, her tears falling like notes around them. One by one, the transformed purifiers joined the other Lumini in bearing witness to something their species had forgotten was possible: the perfect geometry of logic learning to waltz with the wild music of the heart. Dawn painted Hope Memorial Hospital's rooftop garden in gentle gold, transforming the dew into diamonds across the leaves. Xerath stood before the gathered crowd of humans and Lumini, her crystalline form no longer attempting to maintain its original geometric perfection. The cracks that mapped her emotional awakening had evolved into flowing patterns that seemed to breathe with inner light. For 12,000 years, she addressed the assembly, her voice carrying harmonics that made the morning air shimmer. We called ourselves perfect. We thought we had evolved beyond the chaos of feeling, beyond the messiness of emotion. We were wrong. Marcus stood beside her, his presence creating ripples of iridescent light across her surface. Behind them, the garden had transformed overnight. Everywhere her tears had fallen, plants had crystallized into impossible hybrids of organic growth and geometric precision. "Look at these flowers," she continued, touching a rose that sparkled with internal luminescence. "They haven't lost their nature by embracing crystalline form. They've transcended it, just as we don't lose our logic by embracing emotion. We complete it." The assembled Lumini, their own forms displaying various stages of transformation, resonated with her words. Even the few remaining purifiers, their once perfect structures now laced with spreading light, leaned forward to catch the droplets of memory and feeling that fell from her form. "When I first arrived on Earth," Xerath's voice softened as she turned to Marcus, "I thought I was here to study human emotional weaknesses. Instead, I discovered our own forgotten strengths." As if in response to her words, her tears began to fall in a new pattern. Each droplet crystallized before it hit the ground, creating a spreading network of luminescent pathways that connected everyone present, human and Lumini alike. "The Council has received our research," she announced, her matrix humming with joy that sent cascades of light through the crystal network. "They've confirmed what we discovered. Our tears contain not just emotion, but the key to unlocking our species' suppressed emotional centers. We didn't evolve beyond feeling. We evolved to contain it until we were ready to feel it fully." Sarah, sitting in her wheelchair among the transformed flowers, reached out to catch one of Xerath's tears. The droplet crystallized in her palm, forming a small star that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "It's like the songs we sang," the child said, her voice carrying wisdom that made Xerath's matrix resonate. "They're prettier when everyone sings together, even if some notes aren't perfect." Marcus smiled, and the expression sent new ripples of light through Xerath's form. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said softly. "Your people didn't need to choose between perfection and feeling. You just needed to learn how to harmonize them." Xerath raised her hands, and every crystallized plant in the garden began to chime with the ancient songs recovered from her tears. The melody wove together mathematical precision and emotional resonance in ways that made both humans and Lumini sway in response. "This garden," she declared, her voice harmonizing with the crystal symphony, "will serve as the first human Lumini emotional research center. Here, we'll study not just how humans feel, but how all sentient beings can learn to feel more fully, more perfectly, more completely." The sunrise caught her transformed form, sending prisms of light across the assembled crowd. Each beam carried fragments of memory and feeling, connecting past and future in streams of living light. And so, she turned to fully face Marcus, her crystalline hand reaching for his human one. "I choose to stay. To continue discovering all the ways that supposed imperfection can create something more perfect than perfection itself." When their hands met, Xerath's tears fell like stars, each one carrying not the weight of ancient memory, but the light of future possibility. The crystal flowers chimed in harmony with her joy, their song carrying across species and space, telling a story of transformation that began with a single impossible tear. In that moment, as human warmth met crystalline light, Zareth finally understood. Love wasn't an emotion to be studied or classified. It was simply the truth that emerged when you allowed yourself to crack open and let the light shine through.